Hey everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spatelnik and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. But speaking of stress, this is a tough time of year. I will tell you the saga of this quilt in a second. But as you know, I'm a professional organizer by trade, and so I talk to a lot of people this time of year about holiday stress. So let me start by saying Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate to go and close out this year in preparation for the next year. I wish you the very best of luck for both you and your families. But because there's so many parties and decorations and everything else that's going on this time of year, a lot of people get stressed. Both the good kind of I'm having a great time doing all of this stuff for friends and family, and I can't wait to see everybody, and everything's going great. And there's also the I'm lonely, I'm depressed, I can't handle all of these people who are always wishing me to be happy, and I'm not feeling it. And so to all of those folks, I'd like to say, please know that we're here for you. You are not alone. And we want you to be better too. And that may mean finding somebody to talk to about this, a professional or someone who has had some training so that they know how to help you well. But I want everyone to be at their very best this holiday season. So anyway, I usually start with a tip of the day. And so today we're going to talk about the holidays, but we're going to talk about the aftermath. Now, when it comes time to decorate, trimming the tree and putting up the lights and all of the gewgaws and doodads and whatsits and whoosits that we put all over the house to make it all festive, that can be a lot of fun because we're looking forward. We're anticipating the holiday, seeing the friends and family, doing all the fun stuff. After the holiday, putting things away can be very sad because now you're not anticipating anymore. Now it's just the drudgery of putting things away. It's very difficult to do. And so sometimes it helps to set up for the next thing that you want to celebrate, but that's not always an option. It can be months before there's anything worth decorating for. So I recommend that you set aside a specific amount of time to take down your decorations. And maybe during that time, if you can do this with family or friends before they leave town, you can be telling and talking about all of the fun stuff that you did during the holiday season. Reminiscing, laughing, telling jokes, putting on a stupid movie, anything to make it fun and have a good time doing it. It makes a huge difference in how much of a chore this is. Because I remember when I was younger, my mom always put everything away on New Year's Day. So that was the day for packing up all the decorations. And there was no more family left around. They had all gone home. It was just, okay, get the boxes, do the work, put it away, come on. Blah, 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 blah. And so it was a chore. Later on in life, I learned that people are willing to help you put things away and tell silly stories. I remember one year, a friend of mine put the Christmas balls, the hooks over her ears, because she didn't have, piercings that you'd want to put those through, over her ears, and she put on a skit as this character, and we're all laughing as we're putting these things away. So that's my recommendation to you. Whatever you can do to take it out of being a chore and into being something fun that you can do is a wonderful thing. We used to watch Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as we packed things up. And one of the fun things about that is as you age, you learn that Willy Wonka is not a nice guy. So we would do things like talk about well, that's a felony, and this is, he'd probably get 5 to 10 for that, and, oh, that's a health code violation, and, just silly things to make ourselves laugh. Now, if you don't have any family around when it's time to take it down, talk to friends. Maybe you could do your house and then do their house and tell silly stories and watch silly movies and doing that kind of thing. One friend of mine, they have one person who sits out who isn't actively packing things up, and they do a game where the person reads really bad jokes out of a book, and whoever can guess the right answer gets a point for their team. And so it's a contest to see how many people can anticipate the horrible pun that's coming their way. So there's lots of fun things that you can do. So that's what I'm recommending. Okay, so let's get back into quilting. I have been so busy these last 2 weeks because a lot of the networking groups I belong to have been holding holiday parties. So I have been eating like it's going out of style. Oh, I can't wait to get back to a normal diet. But it has really cut into my quilting time. So I didn't get done as much as I thought I would. So I kind of went on to autopilot. Now, autopilot is wonderful if you're a pilot and it's at the right time. I didn't do it that way. So I promise I show you guys my mistakes as well as the corrections. So you heard me sewing probably while you were waiting to come on. This is, by the way, this is the last time we're meeting this year. Our next live stream is going to be New Year's Day. So we're going to kick off the New Year's right with our new quilt and everything else. But anyway, so I've been working on the star quilt. And what I did was when I got to, ouch, because I have a 1-inch wide border here, when I got to the corner, I stopped at the usual place when I did this fold back, way back here. Okay, it would have given me the 1/4 inch turn and everything that you would normally have when you put on a binding. And as I was sewing it and I was folding it back to line up with the blue here, I said to myself, there's something wrong here and I don't know what it is, but I was in such a rush, I just plowed on through and I put them all down. And then I went downstairs and I started turning, and when I got to the corners, it would not fit the corner because there wasn't enough fabric in that corner available in the binding. And so it kind of scrunched and turned and looked horrible. And I realized what I had done. And the only solution to that was taking the binding off of 3 of the 4 sides, because I had already sewn down the one side of the binding. I always leave the corners, so I did the middle section of it. And so I had to take all the corners off and the other 3 sides, which also meant I had to piece in new binding because I had, of course, made it fit, right? I'd done it right in terms of getting everything to fit properly and everything. I just sewed the corners wrong, so I didn't have enough fabric. I was missing 8 inches of fabric worth of binding. So that meant I had to go to the strip that I had left, and now I still have this much left. Here we go. Now you can see. So I still had enough left that I could do it. I like having lots of extra when I'm doing my final close. So that was good at least. But I had to piece that in. And then just now I was doing the final seam to put it all together when I realized I had one of the pieces that wasn't at 45 degrees. So it was off, and so it wasn't going to work. So I trimmed it up again. And now I just sewed it, and I'm going to have to test it and make sure that it fits, or I'm going to have to add yet another piece in on this side. But when I did a quick stretch test, yep, that's going to be fine. I got lucky because it was at the blue end of the strip that I wound up cutting the most off. So it was pretty close on the yellow, so it came out fine. But I didn't know that, 2 minutes before we started this. My original plan had been to have this all completely done, the binding down and everything for today. Didn't happen. So I will show this to you when it's complete. But this is the side that I stitched down, and you can see that that's what my binding is going to look like. This is binding, not a sash, but I split it on the edge, so it's not on the back, it's split right here on the edge, half yellow, half blue. And I'm going to show you how I did that. But I think that this 1-inch binding with the 1-inch sashing here makes it look intentional, and it makes it look the right size. A 1/4-inch binding on the edge would have looked wrong. It would have looked skimpy, and it would have looked more like blocks instead of stripes. So that's why I did the 1-inch border. So when I was doing this, I like a 2.5-inch binding when I am doing the binding for my quilts. So I'm going to move this camera, and hopefully I can show you this a little bit more up close. Ah, yes, that worked for a change. Okay, so this is my 1.5-inch strip set that I made. Okay, I did this on the paper tape that we talked about before. I also stay stitched the edges just to make life a little bit easier, because this edge here, this loose one, is going to flex a lot when you're sewing it if you don't have a way to stabilize it. It'll also start to unsew itself from the edge. So I did just a little tiny stay stitch, maybe a 1/16 from the edge, because that's going to go into my seam allowance, so it's not going to matter. Then what I did was I sewed this to a 4-inch strip of my background fabric. Now, in this particular case, I have some background fabric, and I don't think you can see it here in the light. Oh yeah, you can. You see how this is faded? I made sure that that was on the outer edge, so that when this is folded over, it's going to be on the inside of the binding wrap. Nobody will ever know that this damaged fabric is in there, and so I didn't waste all of this. So anyway, so face to face, I put the damage to the outside, and I just sewed these together. Then I finger pressed and then pressed this with a hard press afterwards. Now the reason for the hard press is that once this is folded, I want this to be really crisp and clean on the edge. If you don't give it that press, sometimes the material from the strip will go under the blue, and sometimes it might be under the yellow, and so you might get a wobbly top edge. So I pressed the yellow to the yellow good and hard with steam. I mean, I really cranked it down. And then when I sewed it on, I got this nice crisp edge like this. And let me show this to you here. Here, okay, here it is on the front. Here it is on the edge. So you see how that's all nice and neat on the edge here? Now, if I wanted to, I could press this again just to crisp it up even more. But I'm happy with it this way, because from the back you don't see the yellow. From the yellow you don't see the blue. So I think it came out really nicely. So this is when you take a 1.5-inch strip, think about it this way. You're going to need the 1.5 on this side. That's going to cover your outer loop, including the seam allowances, right? So you've got 1/4, 1, 1, 1/4. Okay, so that's 1.5 inches to make one of the entire outer rings. So I'm going to need one to do the other half of the, a 1/4, a 1, and then the 1/4 seam allowance is my 1.5. But that's only going to take me from here to here, right? Including my seam allowance. So I need a matching piece for the other side, right? So that's another 1.5. And then I'm going to need the inside portion, which is going to be 2.5. So 2.5 and 1.5 is 4, which is how I got this measurement here. Okay, so this is 4 inches. So 1.5, 1.5, and then my 2.5. And that works out really clean. And what's really nice is this is going to just leave me with a regular folded edge here, just like any binding. It's not going to be super thick, and I'll be able to stitch this down by hand very easily. If I had done a wider strip set, let's say a 2.5, so that it would be the, sorry, not 2.5. Yes, 2.5, sorry. 2.5 for the front. I could have done the 2.5 on the inside, and I would have had this on the other side with a 1 inch. You can play with all these measurements, but if I did that, when I was going to sew it down, I have all of these seams that I'm going to be trying to catch evenly. And so it's just a lot easier to do it this way, but you can do it however you want. That's the nice thing about bindings, is you can really play around with them and make them opposite. I could have added a flange. I could have made it 1 inch on the front and the standard 1/4 inch on the back. It doesn't matter. It can be whatever you want it to be. But I liked the idea of having that 1 inch on the front so that I got that more even look with the sashing. But I could have done a 5-inch binding. It doesn't matter, right? I've had a lot of people say to me, but then it's a sash, and so you would put that on, and then you'd still have to add a binding. No, not necessarily. However, keep in mind, if you are doing a really wide binding, it means there's nothing holding your fabric in place. You may wind up quilting your binding after you've applied it. So something like this, you could do some simple just stitch in the ditch yellow, but you would have to then make sure that you hand tucked in, finished off and buried your threads on those thread ends that would stick out on this end, because you don't have another place to hide them. So just a thought, you could do a stripe down, stitch in the ditch this way, and then stripe backwards, so you'd have the 4 ends instead of, you'd still have the same 4 ends, but you wouldn't have anything in the inside to worry about. But it's still doable. There's no reason you can't. I did have one student who did a stripe piece like this, then a super thin, like a 1/4 inch solid stripe that went the long ways, so bisecting this basically, and then another stripe on the other side, and then that got wrapped the way I did this around to the back side of her quilt. It was amazing. It was stunning. And then after it was on, she just quilted on both sides of that solid stripe all the way around. So she had the 8 ends to bury, which wasn't bad at all. But that was done after the entire quilt had been quilted. Then she bound it like that, and then she quilted just that little bit more, and that kept the batting in place where it needed to be. So just some fun ideas as to what to do with this stripe. Okay. So that's what I'm doing with the annual quilt. So it will be done in 2025. I promise you that. But you won't see it until New Year's Day of 2026. So if any of you have done this along with us and would like to send me a photo. Oh, my sign is down. Let me move my sign so it's there if you need it. Like I said, it's been kind of a crazy time here at Casa Spatelnik. Okay. Let me move it over here so that it'll still be more in view when I am sitting. Okay. You can email them to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and I will put together a little PowerPoint if anybody sends any, and we'll show them on New Year's Day. So that's just an option if you're interested. I know a lot of you have told me that you are doing maybe entire quilts of one block, or you are behind for one reason or another. And so whenever you get them done, I would love to see them. Next thing, why is this quilt up behind me? Well, last time I mentioned that I'm going to go back in and do more quilting on the annual quilt. Not necessarily in time for New Year's Day. Just telling you that now. But I am going to be going back in to do some more quilting. And one of the things that I'm thinking about doing in the stars is this flame, like I did in the center of this star. So hopefully you can see that. It looks like you can. Good. On your cell phones, it's probably too small. But I just did this little flame meander. And I used a variegated thread. So there's some yellow, some orange, and some red in there. So some of this red you can really see, and sometimes the yellow disappears. But in some of these areas, the orange disappears. So you're going to get some differences there. But overall, I thought that that was kind of fun. So I may do that in the stars here in the annual quilt. And then I think I will do triangular spirals in the blue when I get to it. But I have stay stitched all the blocks, which is why I could put the binding on now, even though the final quilting isn't done. I can add that quilting next week, next year, doesn't matter. Okay, the quilt is ready for it when I'm ready for it. So that's why I put this up, so I could show this to you. This is one of the other quilts that I did. This is all done with half square triangles. So if at some point we want to do a half square triangle quilt as an annual quilt, we could do one similar to this, just as a future thought. Anyway, so that's the annual quilts. Now, in one of my guilds, there's a lady, and, well, there's many ladies in the guilds that I'm part of, but she has some new products, and I really loved them, and so I thought I would share them with you in case you were interested. Let me move some things aside here. Okay. So this is Grandma Martha. And so they are 3D printing little things like this. This is great for your rulers. So for example, if you're off on a retreat, these are sized specifically to hold our rulers. So there's this smaller version that you can take with you. There's also this larger version that you could keep on a desk. This will hold all of your large rulers because I've done it. But she also has this little foam piece in here that you can cover in any fabric that you like. It'll come with some fabric on it, but if I decided I wanted this to be purple or green or whatever, I could just wrap a new piece of fabric around it, and this could be your pin cushion. So for retreats, this would be really handy because you can put a small pair of nips, small pair of scissors, your thread, your bobbins, whatever, in this tray, have your rulers sitting up in the back, and keep everything contained for your retreat. So I really like that. I have seen things like this before, but she's 3D printing these. This is apparently done with a variegated printing thread, which is kind of interesting, in a whole bunch of different colors and things like that. I've told you that I use a toilet paper roll for bindings and 2.5-inch strips and things like that, especially when I'm doing the long 15-yard strips. That would not fit on this, but your standard size binding would. You just feed it through here, you roll it up, and you can tuck the end in here. And it comes with a chain, and so you can put it on the chain so that as you're sewing on binding, it rolls right off of this, right onto your machine to make it a little bit easier to do. This works great with the 2.5. You could go, I wouldn't go any higher than the 2.5 with this. But if you're doing 2.5-inch or smaller sashing, anything like that, you could just wrap on this, which means you don't have as many folds, you don't have as many seams in it, as you're doing it. It makes it a lot easier. My stuff comes out of a box underneath my desk and goes all the way up into my machine. This would just come off your neck. Either way works. But this is a really nice, neat, and handy way to keep your binding nice and neat and ready to go into the machine. So these are some new things that she's doing. So I just thought I'd show it to you. It's Grandma Martha's Designs. And if you're interested, she's not sponsoring this at all. This is not sponsored content. But I will show you here. There's her contact information, grandmamarthadesigns@gmail.com. I am sure that if you reached out to her and you said that you wanted a green or purple or orange or yellow or whatever, if she doesn't have it, they'll make it. And they can make whatever it is that you want. So I borrowed these from her because I thought that they were wonderful. I have a stand that I've been using for rulers forever that used to be part of a knife drawer. But this is designed specifically for us, and this is a whole lot lighter than the stuff that I usually carry around. So I just wanted to share that with you because I got to see them this week. I had seen them in the past when she was demoing them and trying to ask people what they wanted. She also has all kinds of inserts and things so that you can put pens and things in her different designs. So there's a lot of flexibility there. The world of 3D printing has really changed things for us. So just kind of a keep in mind kind of thing. I did get about 6 flowers done for the flower quilt. And I did get a whole bunch of scraps processed. Right down to my little bitties that I was telling you about last time. So I'm going to be still working on the flower quilt. That's not going to change. But I am going to be spending more time doing some of my fabric processing because my fabric mountain in the basement has gotten to be insane. And so I'm going to be getting caught up. I usually let it build up. I let it just go. And then I sort everything out by color, and then I wash everything, and I dry everything, and I press everything, and I cut everything, and, you know, and that takes a big chunk of time. So I'm going to spend the next several months, really, spending a little bit of time every day, and I'm going to get rid of that whole pile of scrap material, and get it put away where it belongs so I can access it, in addition to all of the other things that I'm doing. So it's kind of a crazy time, but that's fine. Like I said, it's been kind of weird lately anyway, because, you know, all the family medical stuff, and now my brother-in-law's come down with cancer, so we're trying to make sure that we're trying to be supportive to them. My operations manager is having all kinds of medical problems in her family, so we're trying to support her. So it's being a really horrible end to 2024, as far as that's concerned, but I'm hoping 2025 gets better. You know, book ended badly, but let's start 2025 clean. So that's my hope and my plan. I will be here, as always, the first and third Wednesdays, so that we can progress on the new quilt, which I will be revealing, at least in paper form, on New Year's Day. I have it already done on paper, full size, so you can see what it would look like. And I'm going to be putting together some samples of the smaller piece section, so you can see a couple of different options, and you can kind of go from there. And we'll just do it together as we do it. But I just wanted to let you know that you'll at least see that much of it, even if I don't have a whole lot done on the first. But this time of year, you know what it can be like. So I do have the annual quilt ready to go, and then for those of you that have been around, you know that my son is getting married in February, and so I'm trying not to book and plan a whole lot between now and then, because I don't know what kind of help they might need. I don't know, you know, what other activities are going to be going on, so I'm trying to just keep it nice and light on my schedule as much as I can, so that I can be there if needed. The kids are not children, you know, they're almost 30 and 30, so I mean, it's not like they're 20, so they're past a lot of those kinds of problems, but it is a big step. It is a lot of things to coordinate, and so since her parents have another child who's getting married, come to find out on December, the very beginning of January, the focus is still on that one. And then it's 6 weeks later, and it's my son and Lauren's wedding. So I don't know how much help her family is going to be able to be. So I'm going to make sure that I keep myself available. But that also means I'm not taking commissions, which means that I am going to try to show you more when I'm here working in the office. Obviously, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to start a live stream for you. Or if I've only got 10-15 minutes, I'm not going to do that. But if I get a chunk of time, if I know I'm going to be here half an hour or an hour, I'm going to go ahead and pop on the live stream so that you can join me and watch the progress of things. I am planning on working on some more charity quilts because my stash of charity quilts has dropped dramatically this year. between hurricanes and avalanches and wildfires and all of the other things that happen, I try to keep a nice big stack so that when there's an emergency I can ship 100 quilts somewhere. I am out right now, so I will be working on a whole lot of quilt tops and trying to get them ready to go, and that's kind of what I'm planning on doing in January if I have time. So that's mostly what you're going to see. You're going to be watching me do the StashBlaster 1 quilts a lot. I'm debating whether I want to do some other charity quilts that my guilds sponsor, like Quilts of Valor, those kinds of things. I could still do the StashBlaster style, but I could focus, red, white, and blue for Quilts of Valor, and the sizes change. So there's a elementary school that needs little nap blankets versus a blanket for an adult. It is going to make a big difference. So I may decide to do some of those as well, just to be able to work with some other colors and try some different things. But that's still up in the air in terms of what I'm going to do with that. But I'm hoping to do more charity quilting with you guys in January. Okay, so let's talk about the annual quilt. And I will do some sewing on this with you. And let me go over again what I did wrong and how I fixed it. Okay. So here on my corners, when I first turned the corner, I stopped my 1/4 of an inch from the end, and then I folded back to the fabric like this, ignoring this piece here. This is 3/4 of an inch. You're going to stop the 1/4 of an inch from the end as always, the same way whenever you're doing a regular binding. But when you make your 45-degree angle and then go up and fold back, in this case, you're going to do it to the edge of the batting. So that's going to be an additional 3/4 of an inch up this way. And then you're going to fold it down and you're going to stitch down the edge just like you normally would, except that there's this little flap at the top. And the reason for that is when you go to open this out, you need that extra distance here to be able to put this corner in. Okay, now obviously I haven't fussed with this to get it all nice and perfect, but you can see that it exists right here. And what it was doing before is it was doing this. And I couldn't open it past this point, so I wound up with curves here. And it just wouldn't lay flat. This will lay flat as soon as I do this. Now, in this particular case, what I will do when I'm ready to put this down is I will go ahead and hand stitch this, get it all nice and neat, get it all nice and straight. So I'll have to, tweak it a little bit, pull this little piece out here, because I've got a seam here. That's part of my problem. But I will straighten this out as best as I can so it's all nice and neat and 45 degrees. If you're stuck and this point isn't coming out the way you want, you can take a thread with a big ball knot on the end, put it up through your point, gently pull it while you manipulate the fold with your other thumb, and that will give you that nice sharp point you want at the end. Okay? And then once you stitch it down, you can either go back in if you can and fish that ball out, or you can just snip it. It won't matter if that ball's in there, particularly if you have trimmed this edge. I do trim the corners just a little bit, so if that ball was sitting in that hole, it would never matter. Okay? So that's a little tip to get these corners to come out nice and clean. And I'll show them to you again January 1. But this will really help. Now, these corners are going to be bulkier than the average. You just have to understand that because I have multiple seams coming into play here, plus this extra stay stitching. If you wanted to, you could trim this back as well, but make sure you stay on the outside edge of this and you don't snag your batting or backing. But you could trim this to make it a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to make that turn, but this will then be a weak point in your corner. And so you'd be much more likely to get fraying where you might have to do a repair later. So usually I'm just willing to deal with the bulk. You can also press it really hard and really flat, and that will make things fold over a little easier as well. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so because I had to put it on and take it off and put it on, oh, hold on, let me show you here. Because I mentioned it, let's see if you can see it. Let me move this camera some more. I'm trying to get you an angle. Here is that bad part of the fabric. That's why it's this light colored line. But this is the inside of the binding. That's why I said I put it on the outer edge of my strip. Okay, so here's my strip. And here's my bad part. Right, here's the yellow. So it's in here, but when I wrap this around, it's on the inside. It'll never be seen. This part of the strip is good. Okay? Alrighty then. Let me find the side that's not stitched down. I only got my ends put together that minute before I had to come on with you. So, well, had to come on doesn't sound right. Before I got to talk to you folks. But it did mean that I didn't get it all put away and all nice and neat and get it finished being sewn on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Oh, another nifty thing. Hold on. Back to camera 3. Let's pull this up here. If you wished, instead of cutting this on the 45-degree angle and joining it the normal way, you could simply fold it over. And when you folded this side, if you line it up, you'll get still a diagonal, but it'll have this one additional seam in here. Depending on how you do it, my original one, when I put it together, these were almost the same shade. You never saw that seam, which worked out really nicely. And I wish it had worked out for this, but again, I had sewed it down wrong. Now, obviously, in this case, you probably wouldn't want to do that. But if they're close, you could fudge it a little bit, and nobody would have to know. In which case, this is a straight seam, easy peasy, and you won't have any problems. If these are at 45 degrees, the nice thing about it is that when you get to where you want to end, you simply unsew the little bit, press it back open, cut your bottom piece, this piece, on the same 45-degree angle. Zoop. Well, it would be down here, obviously. Zoop. And you're already set to sew the two pieces. Sorry, here we go, this way. To sew the two pieces together because they're both at a 45. Because I was not the world's best at maintaining my 45, since I was wrenching it around as much as I was, and I didn't put in as many guidelines as I should have, not every single one of these is at 45, which is the problem I had the second time when I was trying to put the two pieces together, is one piece was skewed, partially because it was on the bias, and so it had stretched and I didn't notice. So when I just cut along that same line, it was, instead of a 45, it was like a 60 degree. And so when I went back in and said, why are these pieces not matching up? And I looked at it, that's why. So I trimmed it out and it came to the 45. Okay. Let me see if I can find that again. Here we are. And in fact, no, still not perfect. You can see where I joined them. Because I was in a rush, because we were going to be talking in just a second. But you can see that had I lined this up perfectly, like I thought I had, but didn't, you would never know that this seam was where I put the two pieces back together. Now, could I go back in and fix this? Of course I could. Could I make it perfect? Of course I could. Am I worried about it? No, I'm not. Okay, I'm happy with it the way it is. So, when I stitch it down, yeah, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but I'm still happy. Okay, so all I'm doing right now is I'm going to pin this on. I want this edge 3/4 of an inch from my trimmed up batting edge. The 3/4 of an inch is because when I add the seam allowance, that's going to give me a 1 inch binding on this side. Okay? I don't normally pin, as you know, but I am going to today, because I'm going to want to keep double checking that 3/4 of an inch. It's not usually a problem because I normally trim, sew, done. But because I've had to unpick all of this, not all of my edges are necessarily as straight as they were, and the binding could have stretched out, not the binding, the batting could have stretched out and not be straight anymore. So I'm just doing this as a double check to make sure I'm putting this particular seam where I want it. But it's certainly normally not a problem. If I'm doing it and I just cut everything and everything is still clean, and I'm just, popping on a binding, I don't worry about it. I just start sewing. But I know that there are a bunch of you that get nervous when doing something different like this, so you certainly can do what I'm about to do. Okay. So this is just a 18-inch by 2-inch ruler. And so all I'm going to do now, if you want, you could pin down the yellow first, right at that 3/4 mark, which is right there. And then you could line up the other side. I did that on a couple of these sides. Boom. You could, of course, also put the two sides together. Get your 3/4 of an inch, put it down, and pin. Oh, pin, not clip. Okay. So I'm going to do that all along the rest of this way when we're off camera. But another thing that I'll do on a regular quilt, what I would normally do is clip with binder clips my edges like this. Now there's an added advantage. This provides a little bit of a press as well, all the way into the corners, and I would stitch the corners and everything down early. However, in this particular case, what I'm going to do instead is I will fold it over, make sure I'm happy with it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip, but then I'm going to run basting stitches. So I will run a basting line all along here, all the way around, so I can take this with me and I'll be able to work on this downstairs in the living room or whatever, and not have to worry about pins getting loose and being on my floor, or having all the clips banging around and snagging on things. I do love binder clips. I will often just use those. But with these 1-inch bindings, I find it's easier for me if I do a basting stitch down through on both sides. I stop about this far from the corner. This is where this is the sewn down side that I showed you earlier. I'll stop about that far from each corner. Then I'll manipulate the corner itself, make sure that's exactly the way that I want it, maybe even press it into place. But I will sew this down, this seam here, with a simple hidden stitch like you would use for binding, and then get the back all folded the way I want it, right? And so that it's all mitered up at the back, and then run another round of basting stitches across, taking a couple across that binding in the back, so that when it's time to sew it, I don't have to think. I can do it when I'm brain dead, because I'm just stitching down what's already been placed. So when you're doing something like this, it's a little bit more involved. It can make it easier to do that basting stitch rather than just the clips. But I do like to do the clips anyway, just to make sure that it's all laying down the way I want it to at first, that this edge, that where it's the two different colors, is right where it's supposed to be. And then I'll just take some plain old white thread, because that'll show up really well. And there's only one ear on that binder clip. One of the ears fell Um, and I'll run that stitch, and I'll run it about halfway through the depth here, and that'll keep it far enough away that I can get underneath the binding on the far side to catch any threads, to bury knots, etc., but not so much that it's going to get sloppy. So I hope that all makes sense. So I will, let me recap, sorry. I will sew that one side down. I will binder clip, then I will basting stitch, and then to about here. When all four sides are basted down in the middles, then I'll finagle the centers and stitch the front sides of the corners, arrange the backs, baste those, and then I will just do a normal binding stitch, hidden stitch on the back. So by the end of the night tonight, I should have the binding completely on, and I should have it clipped, and I should have the sides basted. I probably won't be able to get the corners sewn and basted down tonight. It is almost 8 o'clock at this point, and I only got about 2 hours of sleep last night, which is another reason why I'm a little fuzzy in my speak tonight. But I don't want to be doing this when I'm too tired, because that's what I was doing. I was too tired when I was doing the original binding ad, and that's why, even though I knew something was off, I didn't stop, think it through, and figure out what was off. And I didn't even test a corner. Normally, if I'm like, something's wrong, I would have done the corner, and then I would have tested it before I did the other three. Not that day. It was like, I want to get this done. I want to have it all complete before we meet on this coming Wednesday. And so I rushed. And so every once in a while I have to remember that old song, Feeling Groovy, which starts off, slow down, you move too fast. And while I am a speed quilter, one of my goals is production. Let's get a lot done in the small amount of time I have to sew. There are just times when you have to remind yourself, I need to slow this down, I'm making too many mistakes. Or because I'm tired, I'm likely to make more mistakes. And the fewer you make, the less handpicking you have to do. I probably spent over 2 hours unsewing the three sides. I was glad that I had the one side I had already stitched down, and I could use that as my stop. Okay, and it wasn't the side that I had closed so nicely with that vertical seam. So since I had that already done, I'm ahead of the game. Had this been the side that had been finished and I wanted to get rid of that vertical, yeah, I would have had to unsew this side as well. But that's okay. You know, this is not rocket science. Nobody's going to die if it takes an extra day. But that was just disappointing, you know. But we all have those. We all have that mistake that you make. And when you do production sewing, sometimes you don't notice it until it's far too late. I did a quilt. The block was supposed to finish at 14 inches via the pattern. But there was a misprint. And my blocks came out 13 by 15. And I reread that pattern time and time and time again afterwards, and I tried to figure out what I did wrong, and actually I didn't. There was a misprint. However, I didn't know until I had all the blocks in a king-size quilt top done. And I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I asked myself, do I have to unsew all these blocks? Because I would have had to have undone it all the way down to half square triangles and 4 patches. It would have had to go all that far way down because of the design of the quilt. And I thought about it, and the client that I was doing this quilt for was very generous about this. And so I called her up and I said, I have 2 options for you. Because this is the problem, that there was this problem in the pattern. I can either take this all apart, redo it again, and give you exactly what we talked about. But I'm not going to have it to you on time, because I'd have to have redone probably 70% of the quilt at least, or 80%. I'd have had to undo it all and then redo it all. So there was no way I was going to make the deadline. So I can do that. I can add sashing and try to square it up a little bit that way, because if I put, let's say, 1-inch sashings vertically and 1.5-inch horizontally, that would make up enough of a difference along the way to make it closer to the right size. I could add another row at the bottom, and then you can just say that that was the block that we picked. We had choices. And because I could explain those to the client, she just chose to have an extra row put in, and since I had extra fabric, I just did, the one more row worth of blocks, and I was able to complete the quilt. And she was loving it when it was done. She liked the fact that it was a little skewed, the design. It looked like it was intentional. So the ability to bounce back when you find that mistake at the end is huge. That's why they usually suggest that you do a tester block. This is back before I spent the time to redo the math on all the blocks and the pattern. I don't tend to like to follow patterns exactly. I usually start with a basic pattern idea. It could be a block that somebody likes, but then I like to do something a little bit different with it, set it wonky, add sashing, do something strange with color, and of course if it's a commission quilt, all of this gets run by the client. But I'm not a huge fan of doing exactly the same block 27 times. So even if I don't make a practice block nowadays, I do double check all the math to make sure that the cut sizes that they give are correct, including all seam allowances. Because I think in this case what they did was, if it was a 3-inch finished block, they were thinking 3.5-inch raw, so they said to get like a 3.5-inch, two 3.5-inch squares to make 2 half-square triangles, neglecting that additional seam allowance in the middle, because you need that additional fabric in order to make it finish at 3.5. So it was those kinds of mistakes that were made. And so now I go through and I double check all the math on all the pieces in every part of the block before I cut them out, because I don't want that problem to happen to me again. But I was fairly new at doing commission quilts at the time, and I was like, well, this is a professional pattern, it must be right. And I can hear you laughing now. There's almost always a mistake in every pattern. Even when you have them, somebody do test blocks for you, check everything, there's still going to be a mistake here and there. Hopefully you catch it, or someone tells you about it and you adjust it so that the pattern is correct from then on. Or you put a notice next to your pattern that updated or corrections are available if you bought the older version. But it does happen. So it's always a good idea, no matter where you get a pattern from, whether it's in a book or it's just a separate pattern, or you get off the internet, to double check all the measurements to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting, and that it's going to lay out the way you think it's going to lay out. Because if you don't, you could have wasted days, and believe me, I mean days, cutting out and sewing pieces together to find out that they don't fit. So, just a thought. I'd like to make that as a suggestion to you. We are almost out of time. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope that you've had a good time. If you are a returning person, welcome back. And I'm glad to see that you thought this was worthwhile coming back again. If you've had a good time, please like this episode, subscribe. If you hit the bell, it'll let you know when we're going to start. Those of you who've been around a bit know that I start the live stream about 15 minutes in advance of our time, So you have a chance to get the alert on your phone, then go to the restroom, grab yourself a soda, or do whatever else you want to do to settle down to be able to spend that time with us as a group. Today, obviously, we have not been doing much chatting in the chat box, but you are welcome. I don't know what just happened, but something just happened. You are welcome to make comments on the videos, or whenever we're doing this live, to go ahead and chat. When we're doing the sit and sew kind of idea, I am going to have headphones on because you can't hear what I'm listening to because I don't have a performance copyright, and so I don't want to abuse anybody's copyright. But I will still be watching the chat, so that if anybody has a question, or they want to make a comment, or they want to tell me that they emailed me a photo that I could put up during the chat, I'm hoping that we'll fill that space up with people interacting with each other. So that's kind of how I would like this to be as we move forward, is just a fun place to hang out, talk quilting, in my case blather about quilting, and everything else going on in the world, and just have some downtime where it's not, this has to be done this way at this time for this person, blah 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 blah. So that's what we're doing. And just so you also know, for those of you who are new, you will never see commission quilts up on my walls. I'll show you quilts that I've done for myself, or for classes that I teach, or something along those lines. But I always take down any commission work, partially because that quilt doesn't belong to me. It belongs to somebody else, even though I'm doing the work on it. And it would be up to them to decide whether other people could see it or not. I have had some people who have said that I could show a quilt that I made for them, like at my guild, those kinds of things. But nowadays, since the guilds put all those photos up on social media, I'm always concerned that the recipient of the quilt will think that mom made it, and so if it has my name on it, that could be a problem at a later date. I have people that I am doing last-minute Christmas gifts for them to give to other people this week. So obviously I'm not putting a label on it that has my name. So those kinds of things I won't be showing here live because of those reasons. Just so you know, I do a lot more sewing, plus I have my regular business, plus I do speaking, plus I write books. So there's a lot that I do that you will never see here, but I do want to start showing you more of the sewing that I'm doing when I'm doing it, so that you can just follow along and kind of just have a sit and sew with me, you know, a little mini retreat. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the holiday season, no matter what you celebrate, no matter who you celebrate it with, whether it's birth family or found family. And if you are alone, know that we are here for you. You are not alone. There are places that you can go to spend the holidays with other people. I really recommend it. If you're having a hard time this holiday season, maybe because somebody passed away or the holidays are just hard on you, I recommend that you find someone to talk to. There are several online portals that can help with that. If you're in the Northern Virginia area, I can make a referral for you of some really wonderful therapists that I know and work with my other clients. So I would be happy to help however I can. Know that I am here for you. And anytime, feel free to email mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com with any questions about organizing, whether it's sewing room related or not. If you want any referrals for anything, including a roofer, a plumber, or a therapist, doesn't matter, I'm happy to make those referrals for you as well. Again, have a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you at the very beginning of 2025, New Year's Day. Bye-bye.